Okay. Well, here we are,
Here
born to be kings.
and Queens.
Anybody? Yeah. Well, we're back. Another Elizabeth-driven topic. And boy, I'm not going to get in the way, but what I'd like you to kind of tee the audience up with is first how you ended up in this rabbit hole, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about where you're at because I've read your writings about all of these things that just kind of don't add up. Well, first of all, introduce the topic. What are we talking about today?
So today we're going to talk about AI and somebody who decided to whistleblow on copyright violations who wound up suicided. Allegedly, he suicided himself, but there are so many things about it that just don't make sense. I got onto this topic because I wanted to know what else is there out there with AI? What do I need to guard my kids against? Like, what do they have access to? What can they do on it? Like, how does it influence them? And so I got onto this story and I couldn't find anything on it. Like, very few people had said anything. Like, trying to dig stuff up for it was a little bit harder, but the more I dug, the more that I uncovered. I was like, this just does not make sense. His name is Suchir Balaji. I don't think I'm saying it right, so I apologize for that. But he was found suicided in his apartment after November 18th filings that the New York Times did against OpenAI. And it just took me down this rabbit hole of them going into his apartment, them telling his parents it was suicide, his parents, getting their own people to investigate and have an autopsy done. There's allegedly two bullet holes, like there's stuff in his mouth. There's blood in places it shouldn't be in the apartment. The gun was found underneath his legs. There's blood in the sink. They said the first bullet was like the end deal, like that was how he died. And then as well as just things that really didn't add up with any of it, the way they told his parents, just all of it. And I was like, all of this that's out there, and he was willing to whistleblow on just the copyright violations and how it alters algorithms, like on chat gpt. And my kids are getting on there, and if it's changing that, that means it's directly influencing what they're reading. Like, I
Right.
know, yeah, my daughter uses it for college. So if it can change that algorithm to put out what they want or spin it in just a little bit of a way, like social media is made to play on emotions. Like, and
Well, so
people make decisions on that. Go ahead.
so I want to take this bite by piece by piece. You're talking about his name is Shashir Balaji. Is that right? Balaji for all of you people playing at home. He was found dead in his home uh, shortly after going to dinner. It seems the parents are like, this is just not. It's not him. It's not like him. But a little background on it is that he was, from what you shared with me, he was kind of one of the drivers of the advancement of AI. As if there was a pro team, he was on that pro team,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So let just take us back a little bit, okay, and tell me how long ago did this suicided person, aka murdered, happen?
So the alleged suicide happened November. They told the parents on November 26th. They believe it happened on November 22nd. His birthday was November 21st. He was on a backpacking trip, came home. They see him entering. CCTV footage shows him coming through the front gate with his bags, his stuff. He's seen at 7:02 leaving the apartment to go grab dinner. He's on the phone with his dad at that time, lets his dad go, arrives back at around 7:30. His last browser history was at 10:18 p.m. on the 22nd. Um, his dad's last conversation was with him at 7 o'clock. Like, that's
Right.
sad to think about. And then he his parents could not get a hold of him on the 23rd. His mom called at 12:15. She left a message. She really wasn't concerned, thought maybe he was on a call doing some work stuff. The next day, she tries again. No avail. She goes, she knocks on his apartment, no answer. She leaves, calls dispatch, or dispatch tells her to go home, says they'll send somebody out. They send somebody out. They send multiple people out, actually. They knock on the door, no answer. And the mom told them at this point that it was a wellness check for her child.
Yeah.
No, so they didn't even make an entrance to make sure he was okay. They left, didn't even bother calling the parents back to let them know they had went. The parents had to call back, and then they were like, well, we can't open the apartment unless you're here. Bro is 26 years old, rents the apartment on his own. You don't, that's not how that works.
And he's in the heart of the tech business, right? He's the San Francisco, the Palo Alto crew. And before,
go ahead.
When you talk about, like, obviously there's a big jump from him being on the pro team to, we'll get to kind of the evidence stuff, and that's when I want to talk to Craig, because I know you've dealt with some of this stuff before with how the police. And in fact, it seems that the police on this were leaning toward what the parents were saying, that it was not suicide and blood spatter didn't match. And so you wonder, I guess I'll jump to you right now, Craig, is like, what does it take to kind of get the people who are investigating the crime to I don't know, shut it down, or to call it something that, even the investigators don't think it is, based upon the evidence that they're seeing. And they see this all the time, especially in San Francisco. Yeah. I can find out with the rate, but what do you think?
Well, corruption cannot rule the day if you intend to arrive at the truth. And you have to have the right people in there acting in good faith to come up with the truth. And if you have any intention of arriving at anything close to the truth, you have to examine all evidence from all sources. So good, bad, and indifferent. And some of it will verify and validate the physical evidence, and some of it will, pardon me, will be contrary to that. And you can begin sorting the information into different baskets: proven, disproven, and unknown. And only through that process can you get to where one of the baskets will, in the end, become inherently more full than the others. And that's your best indicator. You're never going to know all the truth.
Right.
But you can learn quite a bit if you perform your due diligence, if you exhaust all the avenues. And whenever you have the refusal to examine evidence, whenever you have snap decisions on the scene or prior to arriving at the scene, and when you have the destruction of evidence and the omission of standard protocols and procedures, to me, that's it's either A, incompetence, or B, corruption. So
right.
We know that in the tech realm, there are agencies now that are widely reported in the tech circles of harassing, tormenting, murdering people with the hopes of taking over their intellectual property so that they can be the ones, that intelligence agency can be the one to own that intellectual property and get those contracts and have the control and the use of that intellectual property. So apparently they murder people and they harass them to try to bail on their own ideas or their own, what they should have patented and trademarked and belongs to them, the intelligence community wants. So they scare people, they harass people, they torment them off of their inventions and even murder them as they murder witnesses. So this is just one example of why I'm yelling at the top of my lungs. We cannot restore legitimacy in our United States until we purge our key agencies. If the CIA and the FBI and NSA aren't purged of mass corruption and deep betrayal of the American people, nothing's going to work right. And so I'm holding my breath, waiting for new directors to go, okay, we've arrested several hundred of these people and we've fired several hundred of those people, and now we've reset the culture back to its original chartered mission and good faith. And until that happens, I have no hope that anything's going to get fixed, because you have the same people that have been conducting crimes against humanity, crimes against the people, participating in genocide campaigns, like very, very dark stuff, at the worst level, still in bed and in power in these agencies, and why any director would not have his first order of business to purge those people, identify them and prosecute them. I don't know. I hope that's happening, but until it does, we're just going to see this kind of thing continue. Just this murder will just be even more
Yeah.
commonplace because they
It's
become more emboldened every time they get
yeah,
away
right.
with it.
Right. Every case that, and you don't hear of the, oh, guess what? We found out that it was, it's always, if they do find out that it was murder, they put it off on some random act of whatever. And when it is really suspect that they were part of a patent, there was and Elizabeth, you could chime in on this, is that there was he had an opportunity as a whistleblower. They wanted to buy him out, right? Is that so? Am I in the ballpark of what they were trying to do? And he wouldn't take it. Like he didn't. He was standing up for what was right, in effect, right, against the company.
So kind of. He actually is one of the creators of ChatGPT. Like he was one of the 4 that helped create that. And so at one point, like he thought feeding the information in was okay as long as it was not profit making. It was, to help humanity.
Sure.
And when they brought Sam Altman back and things changed, that's when he really started questioning, like, hey, is this ethical? He did have conversations with his mom.
All right. So let's hold on a sec, because I know where you're going, but I think we jumped the shark a bit. So one of the key thing that we're talking about is that the chat AI world is infringing upon copyright.
Yeah.
Right. Just to be clear. And so as he was developing this stuff, he didn't see anything wrong with, dumping everything in. It was just it's everything goes into the system so that it can think for people. Right. But when did he start to discover that, oh, wait, we're saying it isn't infringing? Because I know in the writing community, people were saying, oh, well, they're in the music community, that is a very tight community. That's how they make their money, is owning the rights to the music. So what was the first indicator to him that they were actually infringing upon the copyright?
So I haven't found that out. His mom has not released everything from his journals for obvious reasons at the moment. So that part I don't know. I just know that when they started making money off of it and it was no longer a free service to everyone, that's when he was like, I'm not okay with this anymore. Like he made a statement saying, if you believe what I believe, then you have to leave. You have to do something different. Yeah. And so he actually left OpenAI in August of 2024. He talked to the New York Times at the end of July of 2024. And then they published their article in October with their own lawsuit against OpenAI for this copyright infringement. And in their November 18th filings, that's where they listed him, among others, as a key witness for this. And then a few days later, he was...
Well, let's unpack that. Forrest and Craig, you think about a guy who has the moral fortitude to say no to the big, to the money. Just say no. Goes to the New York Times to tell them the story. They believe him. They do on his behalf, and then he kills himself. In a culture where that is like really forbidden. In that culture, they're very family oriented. The mom knew that something was wrong because he wasn't contacting her. So that was like a day in, day out. And, I think we're all parents here. You would get an indication that there was somebody riding the lightning, like going, oh, I can't do this anymore. But it looked like there was a lot of hope for his cause. I mean, do you see it the same way, guys?
I do. I look at this with that logical, Occam's razor, which is the first thing that comes to mind. And I know Craig is an investigator, and he would take the evidence and start looking at it. And I think there's one piece of evidence that you don't have to be a highly intelligent person to understand, but there were two wounds in his head. And so because of that, it's very rare, if not impossible, to do that to yourself twice. And so I agree that there's something nefarious going on. And so why? There's always that big question, why? The timeline that Elizabeth shared, it makes it suspicious. The act itself makes it suspicious. The time that they spent on the investigation makes it suspicious. I mean, we deal in investigations that last months and months, if not sometimes years, right, Craig? I mean, it's the timeline itself is suspicious.
Yeah, there are a lot of factors that just that beg for deeper inspection. And when you don't have that happening and no explanation to the public, then it just begs some hard questions and it looks bad. Because it warrants deeper investigation. And so that's why people are so jaundiced now, if you will, so callous and so skeptical. And I think that's look, the crooks don't care. The crooks within our system that are betraying us. Try to imagine how little they care if we don't trust their agencies anymore. They want to rule by force.
Right.
I think that's why they're squealing, at the cut of so much of the corrupt funding. But man, we've got to get a hold of this. It's demoralizing. We are starved for justice. I'm out there on social media every day, and what I see, people are just they're pained, man. They'll say in response to something that may be coming, if you post something has been revealed or going to be prosecuted, the overwhelming skepticism is staggering. People are they're emotionally pained over it, and you can tell they're guarding themselves because they'll say it's never going to happen. Don't hold your breath. Nobody's ever going to get prosecuted, because that's what they've learned to see, and they don't want to get their hopes up again. So they preemptively say, well, it's not going to get fixed. Everything's broken.
Yeah.
Well, how convenient for our enemies when we have no faith in our system and we're demoralized and we've given up. We've quit participating because we've written it off. The FBI is corrupt. They're just going to murder the witness, or the CIA. They'll have the CIA murder their witnesses, and nobody's going to get prosecuted, even though we see them carrying out the crimes and getting caught in congressional session and asked about the crimes. And you can tell they're either refuse to answer, which should be and they should be held in contempt of court, but it's like there's no enforcement. So they just come in and they lie. And it's laughable, but there's nobody there to cuff them up and hold them to account. So they wander away. They continue doing exactly what they've said. And it's so bad that nobody's even talking about prosecution anymore. That you see a lot of people saying he or she should be fired for this one thing. I'm like, this person's been involved in crimes against humanity. They've participated in a literally poisoning of the global populace. This is genocide. And you're saying they should have to lose their job. Well, look, I've changed jobs a few times in my life.
Yeah.
Since when is a job change penalty for severe crimes? I'm at the point where, and this doesn't come from hatred, this comes from literal justice and what's on the books for these crimes. I'm for people that conduct treason, high treason against the American people being hung by a manila rope until dead. That's what I think is appropriate when you betray your entire country and you harm their national security. Seriously, look, we got Aldrich Ames and John Walker, some of our traitors, and they're in prison for life. That's the minimum. Oh, they should lose their job. I'm sorry. I just don't. I just am very frustrated at that. What do you mean they should lose their job? They should get raided and tackled and handcuffed and drugged to Gitmo and held before a military tribunal. And the factual evidence should be carefully gone through in a timely manner. And if they are guilty, they should be strung up and hung for their crimes. And that evidence should be very deliberately made available to the public so we can see how badly they were literally selling us out and betraying us.
Right.
But none of
Now,
that's
when you
happening.
think when you think about this case, and you mentioned a lot there, when you're talking about kind of the indicators that you've seen, because when I was reading this, as someone who had done counseling and therapy, you learn to train yourself to hear motive in the words, how somebody delivers something, and I think that I know you could speak to this, but it's like when they mention that there are drugs in his system, it is telling how they mention those drugs are in his system. GHB was found in his system, and they listed it as the date rape drug, right? But if they were trying to call, if it was let's say a famous person, it would be the party drug, GHB, because that's what it is. Or it's the my brain can't turn off drug. When you're that smart and you're coming up with these things, it's, people self-medicate, they do what they do. But it is interesting how, it's all in the press, right? We can watch it go away, show up, affect us, and go away. And it's all in those little details that people say, oh, well, he was, he a date rape drug, so he must have been depressed. It's kind of how they serve it up. And then you wonder, well, who's the criminal here? Right. Is it the person that's reporting the thing? Because when you look at, the splatter analysis, what they were saying, the trajectory of the wound, the bullet path, and you're like, well, that seems like that's enough to say that scientifically it can't be that, right? But then you see how quickly they roll in the drug thing, or any kind of thing that would make it go, well, possibly, maybe, did he have a relationship? Was it, he looked like a really nice kid, maybe he got dumped, all those things, and we're adding in those aren't facts. It's almost like it's our nature to try to close the case as quickly as possible. I mean, is that what you see what I'm saying about that?
Absolutely. Anytime they start to discredit the victim, it should throw up some red flags. Why would they go and try to discredit the victim? If it was pertinent, if a drug has multiple uses, just say, hey, here's the drug that was found in a drug, or drugs or chemicals that were found in his system, and let people decide for themselves. But if you narrate, if you put a label on it, if the drug is used for several different things socially, culturally, and they assign one thing to it, I'm with you, JT. I think that's an astute point. That's an indication of the motive of who's ever writing that article or reporting that.
I have a thought here on that, guys. I'm thinking what I'm reading, what they're trying to imply is that drug had a motive to help him do what they're claiming he did. That it was a contributor. And what you're saying is, no, that's not, until proven. Traditionally, that product is not used to do that. Like if I didn't have the courage, or if I were depressed, I'm going to take that. And that's what they're implying. And that's the problem that I see you pointing out with the press.
Not just
the press being what? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Not just drugs, but alcohol too. He was twice the legal limit for San Francisco, or at least that's what they said his blood alcohol level was. If he was that intoxicated, but they claimed that there were no alcoholic bottles or any alcohol found in his apartment whatsoever. How do you get both? You see him returning at 7:30 on the footage at the elevator, and he's clearly fine. Like, he's obviously not stumbling around. If he was that impaired, you would have seen it all over the place. And there wasn't that, and they didn't find any alcohol bottles or anything like that in his apartment.
So he goes out and he goes to dinner, because that's what he did. Went to dinner.
He gets to dinner and brings it.
He goes, even if he had a couple of drinks of wine, right? The body is still doing what it's doing, but GHB being what it is, it makes you go, oh, well, that could be the reason, right? And I'm just saying that the press being
what it is.
maybe not doing their due diligence to be fair and balanced. I think it's what Craig is saying is that we want to wrap it up nice and tight. And so it's when they dole out those, and they know this, I think that they know it very well. They can get people to move on faster when there's that. Now, who's going to fact check this, right? Who's going to care? Well, the people are now, but I know, Craig, you could probably tell of many that you've heard and been privy to over the past, just some of the stuff that was happening in the pre-Clinton years, people that were murdered, randomly, but they were in cases against big people. It's been the money. And I think that for those of us because this industry, what are they talking about, Elizabeth? It's like it went from like 10 billion to it's projected at $100 billion industry.
Yeah.
Right. That's not chump change. No. And for anybody who's not pulling the trigger, Craig, I imagine, you could kind of go nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Maybe that person doesn't need to show up for work ever again, or whatever, because with that kind of money, and I believe that's where those are the evil bastards that are out there. They're the ones because the killers that got to go do the dirty work, they're bad people, of course, right? But it's a business to them. They have no dog in it, right? It's money for a service. But what we see is the people that, instigated the thing, the first cause of the death, are these evil folks with the money. And what you said, Forrest, is like follow the money, right? Wasn't that something you had started out with? This is look at who had the most to gain. And now when you're talking about an industry, well, then they all can't be culpable, but if they allow it to go, if they allow you to wrap it up, then they are culpable. If somebody isn't saying no, find out who killed them, because we don't want to be wrapped up in the stigma of killing people for our technology, but that's not going to happen. This story will fly by, the way of the dodo, as many have before. And what I like, Elizabeth, you always bring these stories, and I love that. I'm wondering when you decided you went from how do I protect my kids against AI to this particular story, which lends to I think I see you going, wow, there's the devil in it. It's behind that door that all of this other stuff can happen. Am I getting that right?
You are. So this is what really spurred me even deeper into this is Sam Altman's sister filed a lawsuit against him for sexual abuse starting at the age of 3. So for me, that flipped a switch for me. He was already connected to this stuff. Suchir had already brought this stuff out. He brought proof. He did an analytical paper on it, explaining why this is this. But the fact that his sister sued him for sexual abuse starting at the age of 3 makes me wonder, does he have more going on with it? What would he really have to lose? Because there's no way they killed this kid over a copyright violation. Sorry. So that really led me to believe, what are they feeding into my children? What are they switching things? What are they watching? What are they, if he is involved in that, how is this not affecting them? And that's really just what has made me.
Well, it's a garbage in, garbage out thing. And the thing is that, when we're looking up stuff these days and we search the internet, one of the first things that comes up is Wikipedia. Wikipedia will tell you that, well, this may or may not be true. Right. There's some resources and all of that stuff. But we've gotten to the place where we're like, no, I read it. It was there. So Wikipedia was the thing. But interestingly, you say that this charges, what is the date of the charges filed and relative to his death?
I'm not exactly sure when it was filed, but the first article that I was able to read about it came out in January.
So
and his death was in
his death. Right. Yeah. So this article comes out, and whenever she mentioned it, but now all of a sudden the article is like, well, that's because they have to have a smoking gun. Craig, don't you agree? They have to say he was a pedophile, he was an abuser. It makes sense. This information was going to come out, and he knew it. and it was going to bring shame. And then again, for us, we go, yeah, that makes sense, right? I mean, doesn't it? Kind
Well,
of.
I think it goes back to your earlier point. People like to, the psychology behind it is people like to put a bow on it and say it's done. We understand it. We can move on. Because we don't move on, just like the Las Vegas massacre, we haven't moved on from that because we know we were lied to. We weren't told hardly anything that we know is the truth. So I think to me, it sounds like, not being intimately familiar with the case, but from all that's been said and what we've discussed and what I know about it, it sounds like they're trying to label this guy as sketchy, throw out the drug thing, and cause people to go, oh well, he was a druggie and was, inebriated, and so he probably offed himself. And I'm not going to look any deeper at all the rest of the evidence that demonstrates that no, that's not what happened. It's almost certainly not what happened.
Yeah.
So again, it's back to power and control. And I
Yeah.
think we need to start investigating and highlighting and demanding the prosecution of those who are abusing their authority. And a lot of it's these agencies, they want that next year's fiscal budget. And if they make mistakes, they'll cover the mistakes rather than admit them because they want to qualify for the next year's fiscal budget. They certainly don't want to have less than they did the previous fiscal year. They want the same or more, so they hide their secrets. They hide not hide these secrets. They hide their mistakes, and after a while, they have to, when their mistakes start coming out anyway, they start murdering witnesses.
So you talk about the escalation, and you had said it when you started out, and you look at whenever anybody's challenged, you could get the first lie. The first lie your kids tell you is the general one. No, was I wasn't there, and then you'll accept it because, well, okay, right. But then some more information comes out, and now it becomes more like they amp up on the lie, right? No, because I was like, there's more detail. And in this case, it's the same thing, is that why are you burying the lead? That you use the drugs thing, okay, the GHB in his system, that should have been enough to stop the train on this. And then it isn't, because now op-eds are coming out. And now all of a sudden, oh, it's the lead. He was raping his sister, right? And it seems like as the heat gets turned up, the lie has to match it. It has to be bigger, more grand, right? Like, Craig, like it's got to be the worst thing now. Now he's a villain. He's not just a sad guy who killed himself. He's got to be the guy that we don't care that he's dead, because good for him, right? Yeah. And that to me is really interesting. Go ahead, Craig, Elizabeth.
It's not him that they're claiming raped his sister. Suchir is an only child. It's Sam Altman. And I had to go.
So is it Sam Altman? Sam Altman is he was the guy they brought back. So for everybody not paying attention, our hero of the story left the industry and said, if you know what I know, you'd have to leave, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got that guy. Now he gets lured back into the job somehow, but now that
Suchir states Sam Altman at one point wound up getting let go. And then got brought back on. It doesn't really say why he got brought back on, but whatever. So that's who got brought back on. And that's when Suchir's opinion changed, because that's when it changed into a money-making thing. It was no longer for the people. It wasn't meant to better humanity at that point. It was all about making that money and how do we feed it to influence people to make more money. And that's really
so just so that I can make it clear for what I was saying before, I'm thinking it's this other thing, but it could be the inverse, where the press is all of a sudden now there's more motive toward this other guy, right? There's more motive that So
and I actually had to go dumpster dive on Sam Altman to even find out that information. Why
is it
why were they not
Altman? Right.
Why was that not thought about? How in 40 minutes did police decide that this for sure was a suicide, and tell his parents that, and not do that digging into the people that would stand to lose if he actually was a witness for the New York Times and produced the evidence that he had.
Right. So this guy, it seems, well, reasonable to me that you have $100 billion industry, or the option as ChatGPT being the one that people talk about. There are others, but it is definitely a nomenclature. Yeah. And you
it's
have
like the Kleenex of
Kleenex, right? We all, or paper, like Bounty. It's not all Bounty, but people, my Hispanic friends call all paper towels Bounty for some reason. I don't know what that is, but the idea, it seems to me like it would be only responsible of law enforcement to spend extra time when there looks like motive and it's connected to big money. Maybe the gun was in his hand. Maybe blew a bazooka. Maybe even wrote a note in his own hand and filmed him doing it. But when there's money involved, like this kind of money for the American people, because I know that we've been gaslit for, about a lot of things for a long time. But in these last 4 years prior to the new administration, I felt like I was being set on fire every single day with things that were like, how can they say and nevertheless became the word that they could say to you. It was like, yeah, but it's not true. But that was last week.
Yeah.
That was yesterday.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, but it's what they said yesterday was a lie. And no one is going after that story. Now we are seeing some change, but how many of these, I'm sorry, what's his name again?
Suchir.
How many of these are out there? Tons. Go ahead.
And I got a great point about that. You touched upon it. Craig connected the dots. Okay. I think that the media jumped on this because they had skin in the game. AI is a threat to the media. But I think this is happening way more. And the reason this got some traction is because the New York Times recognized, hey, we are threatened by AI. And we have a platform where we can fight against them and maybe protect it. I bet they thought they could protect us.
But they're all using it. That's the thing. We're all using it. It's so crazy when you think about it, because AI is saying, I know I'm evil, but I'm the person telling you what's going on, right? Hey, I know I'm evil, but didn't you ask how crickets survive in the wild? Wasn't I the thing that told you the whole thing, gave you all the information in one page and got you back to work and, writing your paper or this, whatever. So it is like you're married to this devil. And we all are, because if I type in something about this guy, AI is the first thing that comes up and says, this is what I found. Hey, and it is really interesting because as it is not a devil in and of itself, it doesn't even care that it will tell on itself. It's saying, yeah, they think somebody killed it. The AI is saying, yeah, they think that he was killed. Right? It's pulling in information that would, because it's like
the kid with no filter. It's like Dennis the Menace.
No, it's the Terminator. We created Skynet, and Skynet said, kill them all, right? Kill them all. And it's this it's a brain that makes things move but has no soul, right? And I think that that's why it's so alluring to people, because we're bought out so cheaply. We're bought out with money. Now, I don't know what I would do for $1 billion. I'd probably do almost anything, and I hate to know that. I'm just glad that I'm probably not going to get offered $1 billion too much, right? But that money is the thing. And you could say, well, I would never. And you're like, yeah, the closer you get to the mammon demon, the mammon god, right? When they say, if you dance with the devil changes you. You don't change the devil. And I think that that's what we're all doing, this dance. And that's why it's easy for, I want to rage like you, Craig. I want to rage to the dying of the light. I want to be Ulysses. I want to do that too. But at some point, Ulysses had to roll over and say, "It's just not my problem. It's not my yard." I'm just so. we would hope that the new generation would have that kind of zeal. But lately, all I see is like falsehoods. Like they're defending the young or defending the lie, despite what you can find out what the truth is. What do you think, Forrest?
Well, I mean,
Sorry,
if you take you could take our current president 10 years ago, in 2015, he was the most loved person in Hollywood. And when he put his name in the hat, all of a sudden he became the most hated. And the same thing with Elon. I mean, you go 2 years ago, it was the same thing. You know, people are setting cars on fire, and most of the people that are driving these cars are probably in the same spectrum of the political beliefs of the people catching the cars on fire.
Right.
It's weird to me. And so,
yeah, you mentioned that what was the trigger though? Like here's a guy that was going to space and we're all cheering him, what he did. We all were in awe of him creating technology, wheelchairs for people, allowing people to see and hear who couldn't see and hear before. And then because he gets involved in doing what he does best, which is, streamlining the system, it's like he's Hitler, he's the devil, he's these things. And I was like, man, how easily, why do you think that is? Why will they cut off their nose? They wouldn't even take the cancer cure that he would discover to spite him. What do you think that comes from, Craig? I mean,
I think it comes from the media corporations that are owned by four entities that are of a specific Luciferian global Marxist ideology. And they believe, and if you read their proposals for Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, these people intend to wipe out about 90% of the globe's populace. They're very sick people. And they have an agenda, and they want to destroy the United States. And so
talk about that agenda, because you never really get to, because I don't think anybody ever asks you. Well, I'm asking you, because I'm not well read on it, but what would be the payoff for these groups? What is the big payoff for them? What is the
wealth and power, really? The further you get from the light, the more you get into the darkness, the more dysfunctional you get. So these people, while they are among the most wealthy and powerful people on earth, they're very sick in their minds. And you watch what they write in their proposals, and you're like, what the heck is wrong with you people? You're not normal. You're not okay at all. Why are you sitting on this level of money and power? And it's because you can't address it without talking about the spiritual aspect of it. We are in the earth is in a fallen state, and the God, small g, of this earth right now for a season is Satan. And he's hooking those people up who make war on their fellow man. And the people that make war on us all want wealth and power, and they'll do anything, and they'll participate in these genocidal campaigns. They'll participate in poisoning the atmosphere and the water and the drugs and the food and all of it, all of the lies. And that so they need a lot of deceit to sell their tyranny, because you and I aren't going to roger up to be enslaved for willingly, right? Knowingly.
Right.
So there has to be a lot of that deceit. Well, if you want mass deceit, you have to own all the microphones. So they've started up companies and they've bought others, and they've made sure that they own all the microphones, and they own academia, and they program people, and they own Hollywood now. And that's why Hollywood's putting out such distortion and such destructive perversion and just dysfunction. Why is it so ugly now? It's all of it. It's orchestrated. They're doing this so that they can weaken and demoralize the populace, simply so they can have the control and do what their dark lord wants them to do, so that they can have wealth and power. So in their minds, apparently, they believe that if they can wipe out most of the American, or most of the global populace, then the rest will be easily controlled and won't ever be able to rise up and challenge them for power again. So it's all about wealth and power. It's always been. but you're just dealing with dysfunctional and demented minds. So these people are living in a distortion. They're probably, I hate to say it because people will say, well, you're being callous to trauma victims. They were almost certainly traumatized in their youth. And when I say traumatized, when I talk about in these Luciferian bloodlines, these people torture their children and program them. It's familial. We're interviewing so many survivors. So when you get into that, you're like, okay, they're literally creating, systematically and
Yeah.
deliberately creating psychopaths
Well, the
in their
sickness,
families.
the sickness that is pervasive is that the real horror of dealing with families that have abused their children are the ones that believe that they were right to do it. That's how far from center they are. They so egocentric, so narcissistic that when they're doing these evil things, like that one lady who locked her kids up out west where you guys are, what, Utah. She was just recently torturing her kids. She believed that they deserved it. Like she was the antithesis of Elizabeth, wants her children to thrive. This person it was obvious to me psychiatrically that she went from, I want to be more, right? The narcissism thing. I believe I'm more. And as she got to be more, it like you said, the closer she got to the devil, to that selfish thing, the more it looked like wisdom to her. The more it was like, well, yeah, no, I mean, the demons, my kids are, they're possessed, and I must do this. And it's funny that the minute you get arrested, all of a sudden, you're like, I guess maybe they weren't, possessed. But in the meantime, that's the horror of parents who beat and hurt and their children, is that they believe that there's like, well, I'm just doing what, I'm trying to teach you a lesson. It's like, yeah, but do you think you need to use wrenches and belts with big hooks on them? Like, that can't be logical. But for them, it's a fear response. Well, if I get, I remember my mom said, well, you turned out all right. And I just look at her. I go, oh, well, thanks, right? Thank you for that. But I see that's it's a willful, it's narrative that suits them, right? So those people, when we were talking about these people that are doing these, really planning these things, kind of doing the card trick for us, they're showing us this hand and saying, kill that. Meanwhile, they're coming around in your back door, planting the pods, so that when you go to sleep, the pod people arrive, right?
Yeah. Well, JT,
I'm not. Yeah, go ahead. No,
I was going to
please.
say, you talked about the people that thought that they were doing right by abusing their kids. Well, that's someone that's in distortion and their mind is not well, and they're trying to raise their kids and they're doing the wrong thing. But what I'm talking about, you're talking about the news outlets, who owns them, what's their motive, and where does it come from? Forrest said, well, the news agencies are defending themselves. I don't think that they really think for themselves to defend themselves. I think they do what the heck their owners tell them. They say whatever they're handed the script to say, and their owners have a global agenda for their own wealth and power, and they own these news agencies, and they'll say whatever the heck they're told to. So the people that are in that camp, those owners and all those bloodlines and those families and those networks of global power, a lot of them are in a very deliberate, systematic, intentional trauma and programming of their children. They mean to break their children and cause them to be psychopaths because they believe they're building an army. To really overthrow the whole earth. They're very, very sick.
I kind of get what you're saying there.
And there's other people that are just wrong, and they're abusers because they don't know how to raise their children or whatever.
There are people that I knew that back in my younger days that were Satan worshipers, right? Whatever they thought that was at the time. But when they pull it all these years later, they're like, well, I was just interested in this girl, and she thought that was cool, and yada, yada, yada. But there's the cell. Like there's the minions are doing their job because the media is made up of minions who are doing whatever the boss tells them to do. And then the hiccups, they get rooted out. But, I think that the real horror, or the real, I guess, scary part is that everybody's removed from the sin by a reason that is plausible. If you understand what I mean, it's like I don't want to overthrow the government. Yeah, but everything you do supports that. Yeah, but no. I mean, I report the news. I'm like, but do you? Like they're so far removed from like that the culpability thing. Like The View, Whoopi Goldberg, great actress, right? Great actress, funny. Color Purple has me crying all the time, right? The woman I see sitting on that show, that's not Whoopi Goldberg. That's somebody who said, I'm just speaking my truth. You're like, you were a comedian. You were the most unfunny old person. Like, where do they sell out? And I think it is that money. The people that can be bought out for money, I think is the weakest reason, but it's so pervasive because it's just like, they're not telling you you're selling out. They're saying you're doing a great job, man. Here's a bonus. Doing a great job. Yeah. And they feel that, oh, I mean, if I heard I was doing a great job doing something from my parents who were like not those people, I don't know, it's brainwashing because if I know that I'm going to get the good job attaboy, I'm going to keep doing that thing. So I'm selling out for that too. Hey, Elizabeth, what do you think? I mean, am I off the reservation here on this? What?
No, for one, you influence children so much about when you do tell them it's a good job or not. Like you can dictate how they feel about themselves and what they did do. But I really look at all of this like it's like a glorified cartel. How does a cartel control its city? Mm-hmm. Money and fear. You break it first. You break it, you're going to control it. So you do the money, they do the influence, and then the break happens, and they're doing it to our kids. That's really who they're going to influence. They're
cartel.
They're playing on their emotions, driving all this stuff, and then making them fear other things and what's going on. And government has control. Like they're feeding them all of this stuff and getting them to not think about themselves, all because they played on that emotion.
Right. Like, the whole cartel thing, you look at it and say, the cartel runs, who's the cartel? It's not a person. It is a collective regime. Like it's just like that weaves into each other. You meet one without the others, they're nobody. But yet the fear and the work they're able to do, even when they're disconnected like that, they're connected by a theme. And I think that you really kind of catch on that. And, one cancer cell will kill you when it spreads. And I think that right now, the last 4 years, I think has been a huge cancer, a huge sickness that has allowed things to grow so out of whack that even when people see the light, they don't know it's the light. When they see the right thing, they can't comprehend it, can't be. And that is the worst kind of illness. That's mental illness. You see the truth and you reject it.
Yeah.
Summarily.
Or you're so distracted, you see it, it doesn't even register on you. I saw a meme today that said, the enemy doesn't have to defeat you. They just have to distract you.
Yeah.
Right.
Boy, that's been prevalent in my life.
Yeah,
I look at so many things that I wish I would have done better, but I was distracted because I'm trying to juggle all these balls and keep all these plates spinning in the air on all these different sticks, and if I don't get something accomplished, I'm hard on myself and I agonize over it. I'm like, man, how many distractions are there designed into our society now?
And what's the number one distraction, guys?
Social media.
Media, period.
Yeah.
Right. Started with radio, the books, radio, whatever. But I mean, think about what we could do. Think about how our families would be. And I know Elizabeth knows this better than anybody. If they would turn off the TV, they just put the phone down and instead of, petting the cat, they were loving on each other, and talking to the kids, playing board games, doing what Elizabeth does. And I tell you, people, if you don't know, watch the other episodes. Elizabeth is some kind of like, super, in my opinion, super mom who's been through so much, and I can't wait for us to share more. But I want to give everybody a last word, and Forrest, I'll throw it to you.
Well, Craig kind of said it. You kind of said it, and I always say it's the magician and the pretty girl, and the media is like the pretty girl, and we're looking at this thing. In the meantime, our government is taking more of our taxes. We're taxed on the money we earn, the house we buy. Everything we have is taxed. We're being taxed to death, and that's about wealth and power. So the thing that Craig said that I've been saying for a long time is we're over here looking at this person. You're like, man, I'm getting killed over here. Like, but wait, look at what's going on over here. And so, I noticed this and I always look at the reference point when I realized the game. It was when Michael Jackson was on trial, and Michael Vick all of a sudden was being excoriated for dogfighting. And all of a sudden, we weren't talking about Michael Jackson anymore. We were talking about Michael Vick. And at the same time, there was a woman, a B-list actor, who was killed by what's his name? I can't think of his name right now. Phil Spector, and he got a hung jury. And nobody's talking about this poor woman who was killed. And there was a smoking gun. There was eyewitness testimony.
Well, he went to prison.
Well, eventually, he was retried. He was retried. But I'm just saying, and I was watching this game going on, and I realized at that moment what Craig said is, if you are controlled by the media, you're not looking at what's going on over here.
Yeah.
So it's like a shell game type deal.
Well, as I give it back to Craig for as we go out, Craig, I remember in Sears school, you get the hard sell interrogator people, and it's a challenge. But I was more likely going to do anything for the soft sell guy, right? The guy that came in and said, hey, man, right. And that lesson I've taken through all my life. The soft sell guy is the one you got to watch out for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The one that comes at you with his fists, that's an honorable thing. It's the one that's like, hey, man, I dropped some food off at your house. I said hello to your wife. Oh, okay. Thanks a lot. Right. It's like they're the ones. Go ahead. Take us out. Right.
The best interrogators use the soft technique because it is more effective. And I'll just say, in my closing for today is, we cannot sustain a hostile propaganda media. It's unsustainable. So something has to be done. I'm huge on free speech, but when you have your media monopolized and owned by your literal sworn enemy, then you have to find a solution. We can't leave it how it is. It's already shifting organically. People are abandoning the fake media because we see that they're lying. But I think for the stragglers that haven't abandoned ship, we need to label them as tabloid or something and let people know that they are being deceived more deliberately. And I think they should have to qualify to become a news, quote unquote, news outlet. Qualify by accuracy over time. Demonstrate you can tell the truth, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Do that for a while, and then you can be labeled a news agency or outlet or channel. And if you blow that and you show us that you're hostile again, you're going to deliberately lie repeatedly, we're going to take that qual from you so that people are aware, just like a warning label on cigarettes.
Right.
Maybe a bad analogy, but
no,
it's
works.
unsustainable.
Well, Craig, what's interesting about what you just said is about 8 or 10 years ago, we started noticing that a tabloid outlet, TMZ, was providing better, accurate information
more news,
than the actual news agency.
Yeah, it looked like gossip, but at least it was true. They had facts. They're so prone to being sued that they have to make sure that the facts are. And that was in the Johnny Depp trial. That was one of the first things that came out. The guy that helped Johnny, he said, look, the picture that was taken that she pretended that was was real. They're like, no, it was this, and then they went at him, and he's like, look, we get threatened with being sued all the time. We have to do it right. it has to be true. We have to have the video. We have to have the audio. We have to have the story. And you're like, yeah, they're such a tabloid gossip, gross thing, but they are at least, they've got the integrity left. Now, last thing, Elizabeth, I'll tell everybody that we're going to have some more conversations, but I know that we're not done with this because you got through half of the stuff that you wanted to talk about. So I'd love to continue that, but I also want I want us to have some more of these opportunities between us, so that we can kind of keep the conversation going and add other people into the conversation. But I said that Craig would take us out, but why don't you take us out? You tell us what you want. These our mothers, our fathers, because we're all family, right? Like, and I always feel like you're speaking to that family gene, not the businessman, not the crusader. Tell us the deal. I won't interrupt.
You're good. For me, parents, like, media is such a distraction. Do your research, like, such a distraction in a way that Peanut the Squirrel came out in November 2018. Or not 2018, sorry, November last year. At the same time all of this happened, and they're talking about AI, and they're talking about algorithms getting changed, and they're talking about the input of what's being fed back to your child, tailored in a way that they want it to. Like, that should be a concern for you. Like, get on, look these things up. And it wasn't even mainstream media that brought this story out. I listened to a Tucker Carlson podcast, PPD.
Yeah.
I found it that way, and then had to dig to realize AI is changing the things it's feeding my children. So really being parents, being present, getting into that information, because you really have no idea what they're feeding your kids.
Well, you brought it back around from our first episode, which was about the Peanut the Squirrel. And it does kind of say, wow, we spent a whole bunch of time. And that was during the time that this, all of these real people dying issues were happening. And yet that squirrel thing was like top of the list. So yeah, I'm a bit ashamed for that. But anyway, I
have one unspent round. One
Go ahead.
unspent round is when I was working overseas in the intelligence community, I noticed that Al Jazeera was giving more accurate, less anti-American information than was MSNBC. And CNN. And I was stunned to see that. Wow, Al Jazeera is shining the U.S. in a better light and a more accurate light, according to because I was boots on the ground, involved in things that I was seeing portrayed on the news. And I'm like, wow, they're giving a more accurate view than MSNBC. Why are we allowing disinformation, deliberate hostile propaganda in our mainstream news media? Why are we allowing that? And of course, it's under the banner of free speech, but then that's why I say it's unsustainable, because there are people right now who understand things literally backwards from the way that they factually are. And that's destructive.
Well, I tell you, Craig, I know we don't have time to get into it, but you mentioned Al Jazeera. We need to have a conversation about that, because from the first Gulf War to, as times progressed, I absolutely have to check the media against itself and look for somebody who disagrees with the things, to see what the balance is. And so we need to have a conversation about that as well. So for everybody that's with us, please, go to the next video if there is one. We're getting more and more content out there. Like, share, subscribe, of course. But mostly just engage. And we're going to do better the next time that we kind of do this. I hope we'll be involved in a live chat situation, so that we'll put that out on social media, and we'll see you later. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good night. Good night, John Boy. All right, guys.